fans, welcome back to Room 237, and while this is not an actual Italian Giallo review, it is another Giallo tribute or homage film, and it is the 2015 film Francesca. And I know how this cover kind of looks like a Korn album cover, which is a compliment. Love Korn. This is actually the sophomore effort, or I don't know if it was their sophomore effort, but it's the sophomore film in the Onetti Brothers Giallo trilogy, which followed their first one, Sonno Profondo, and was followed by Abracadabra. Now, I will say right off the bat, this is a perfect middle ground film between these two. Not just that it came out in between, but this one was very experimental. Almost felt like a student film, like very, 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 very stylish. It really felt, like almost like a student film trying to capture 70s Giallo with their own style. This one is, and this one is just, it feels like, although still stylish, a streamlined Giallo. This one is sort of the perfect mid-ground between that. It's still very stylish, but it's a bit more of a comprehensible story and a Giallo story than, say, Sonno Profondo. And I did enjoy it more than this. I might still say that this is my favorite of the three, but I still enjoyed this story and the visuals and the music. I still think they did a really good job at capturing the very essence and feel and spirit of not just 70s Giallo, but in particular the works of Argento and Fulci, a little bit of Pupi Avati, little Umberto Lenzi, maybe some Mario Bava, but definitely Dario Argento. And I'm not sure where it would stack up between, as with the works of Helena Cate and Bruno Forzani, who did Homage and Strange Color for Your Body's Tears. These are very stylish as well. Very different, though. They kind of look modern, but that's a whole other story. I still need to review this as well. But as far as the Onetti brothers, it was directed by Luciano Onetti, who also wrote it, and it was co-written between Nicholas and Luciano Onetti, directed by Luciano, produced by Nicholas, but it was also edited and scored by Luciano. Same with the other two films. And this one's actually longer. It's a little bit longer than Sonno Profondo, which is another reason why I kind of felt like an experimental film. It's only like an hour long. This one is more feature length. This only says 77 minutes, but I think it's actually more like 80. At least that's what the display said. Now it stars Raul, Giter, Lidway. I'm going to butcher all these names because this is also, like the other two, a co-production between Italy and Argentina. It's in Italian language. Silvina Gripaldi, Gustavo D'Alessandro, Luis Emilio Rodriguez, Evangelina Groisha, Martina Negrelli, and a bunch of other people. It lists almost everyone. And for having such small credits other than the cast, the opening credits go on for quite a while, and it keeps alternating between Luciano Onetti, Nicholas Onetti. That's like almost every credit. But I really like the visuals and the score of the opening credits, especially when that slow motion just flying of the bird comes up. Just that music cue as the bird flies up with just the black background. I thought that was beautiful. But the main story is there's a series of murders with a red peacoat clad female killer with red gloves, which also, the first image of this film is just a black screen with just like a little black leather glove in the center of the screen, which both of these had as well. And the killer is going around killing people and leaving clues based on Dante's Inferno. It leaves these special coins on the eyelids, leaves passages of Dante's Inferno with a magazine cutout notes at the crime scene. And the two inspectors that are working on the case think there might be a link between these Dante killings and this case of a missing girl named Francesca from 15 years prior. And it's pretty good. I mean, the color filters and everything look great. I mean, it really has this gritty, grainy, almost grindhouse look to it. It does kind of feel like it's someone modern trying to do so. I mean, I've seen other films like this one, which I reviewed recently, House of the Devil, which I said looks and feels like a movie from the early 80s or the late 70s. But they actually used the camera technology from back then. But, I mean, even after a while, you get used to it. It does pull you in, and it can be very convincing at times at just how authentic it feels. I can't remember if it was, I think it was Abracadabra. They really used that thick, vibrant, like tomato sauce or red paint blood that was in a lot of Giallo of the time. This one has like a more modern or even like a Tom Savini type blood, which when mixed with the color filters and the color palette of the film and the grit and the grain, it gets this really visceral, nasty look to it that I really like. Especially with the first victim who's got tape on her mouth and it gets punctured with this sort of, I don't know what it is, like a probe or something. And just the way the blood's coming out and everything, it looks awesome. But the film opens up with all this imagery, like the bird flying and just all these cuts. It doesn't have as much of this otherworldly feel as Sono Profondo, like with all its crazy close-ups and crazy angles. Like I said, it's a bit more streamlined. But we see this young girl named Francesca who has this pointy object, and it's like she's laughing and poking at something, which we see as a dead bird. And she then goes up to her baby brother's room, and we see very quickly she has poked him in the eye with it, and she's laughing. That's when the mother comes in, screams, and then we jump 15 years later. And that's when the murders start. And basically, the connection that they're seeing is, because we see the first victim get killed, and like I said, red peacoat, red leather gloves, big hat, red, like black high heels, black pantyhose. Has this woman tied up, mouth taped, stabs through the tape, and then we see that she's left at the park. There's this elderly woman who is an eyewitness to the body being dumped. And they realize that this note that's left is Dante's Inferno. So they go talk to this one guy, I can't remember his name. Vittorio, who's played by Raul Giter, who was a famous stage performer that would recite Dante's Inferno. So, and it's Inspector Bruno Moretti, who's played by Luis Emilio Rodriguez, goes to talk to him and realizes, hey, this is the same guy Well, I think he brings the note to see what it was and say, hey, you used to recite Dante's Inferno. This is Dante's Inferno. By the way, you have a daughter that's been missing for 15 years, and this first murder is on the 15th anniversary of her disappearance. So that's sort of the genesis of having these two cases mixed together. But Vittorio is retired from the stage. I don't know why I did that. He is retired. He's in a wheelchair. And, his story is that a robber came in one night, stabbed him in the spine, thus paralyzing him, and took Francesca. And the mother kind of suffered a mental breakdown. She's not right. Now she's bedridden, and Vittorio has to take care of her. All the while, there's other people that are being killed, like the elderly woman, the eyewitness, gets killed. She gets killed with the clothing iron to the face, which a really nice touch was after they touch it to her face, or the killer does, then pulls it away. We see like blood and stuff on the iron, just kind of gives it that dimension of that is sticking to it. Just, it helps add substance and make it more effective. Like how Tom Savini would have a killer miss a victim and like have something stab into wood or whatever next to it with the real weapon. That way when they would go in with the fake one, it would have that sort of image, that impact that it's this real thing. So it just makes it look hot and more effective that there's like some skin and blood on the iron. I thought that was a nice touch. There's a famous piano player who has been retired since a car accident killed his wife, who's now coming back for the first time. But in each passage of Dante's Divine Comedy has something to do with the person, so it's also kind of like Seven. The old lady, I don't think they really get into, but like the piano player was having an affair with, they suggest, his assistant, and what happened was he was in the car with his wife, he was distracted, lost control of the wheel, swerved into a truck, and it killed his wife. So like the passage that's left at his crime scene is from The Circle of Lust, which tells a story about two lovers. And he's killed during a rehearsal on the stage he was going to perform on. Yeah, always leaves these coins on the eyes, which we see the killer ordering these special coins from a collector. It says that one of the piano players a very special job, so has to pay a lot more money. But some of my favorite scenes, like, I don't know what the neighbors are doing. With like some of the most style would be like this sequence, which is like a nightmare dream sequence, which happens a lot throughout the film. Vittorio and his wife have these dreams about Francesca, which paints her as a deranged child. Like, not only did she stab her baby brother in the eye, presumably killing it because it doesn't show up again for the rest of the film, but she also dreams of this one time when they were at the park and Francesca pushes the stroller down a hill straight towards the water, and she just stands there laughing. Also how she tries to teach Francesca Tchaikovsky on the piano, which I like the sound effects of. It really creates this dream world atmosphere. It reminded me of Clockwork Orange when Alex is having his head held down in the pig trough and he's just being beaten by Dim and Georgie. And just like those weird sort of kind of sound effects every time he gets hit. That's like the sound with every piano key that she hits. And just being berated by the mother because she keeps hitting the wrong key. So they both remember her as this demented child, and they're suffering nightmares about her being taken, but also she's this twisted kid. And all the while, the killer... There's another sequence that I really like, especially with the music. It just has this ominous, almost screeching type sound to it, where the killer is looking at these like pornographic slides. And I don't know if it's supposed to suggest that the killer is now masturbating to it, but like there's like this side shot where we see the killer sort of like grabbing the front of the projector. You see the shadow or the silhouette on the screen of like the fingers. And then like this shot, like there's a bunch of mannequins everywhere. You see like the head of a mannequin with a hole in the head. The killer's hand comes around and like his fingers going in it. I don't know if it's supposed to insinuate what's going on, but that's what I got out of it. But with the music and the style, it was pretty effective. And so yeah, the two inspectors are getting closer and closer. Not much more I could say before getting into spoilers, but I thought this was a good movie. And you know, I would say it was better than Sono Profondo. It didn't feel like it was so, I don't want to say self-indulgent, but when you compare the two, that's certainly what Sono Profondo felt like. A more self-indulgent kind of student film that was going to be an homage to 70s Giallo, but was so up its own style that it didn't really grab me as much as, say, a more streamlined yet stylish Francesca in a really streamlined Abracadabra, which, oddly enough, is why this one is probably my favorite of the three. I wasn't sure what to expect as far as who the killer was. I will say it wasn't too surprising, but it also felt like it was trying to outdo itself with each twist. The one at the very, very, very end I didn't see coming, but I love the music. They did a good job at really making it feel like it was in the 70s. Also, just like the other two films, there is a character reading a classic, Giallo magazine with the yellow covers. So that was nice. But the clothes, the cars, the phones, the fact that there's like a projector, all the technology, just everything about like really immersing yourself into the setting of the 70s. Even though I don't think it says what year this is supposed to take place, but it definitely felt like it. And I never even did finish talking about this, but yeah, this is just almost like it feels like a music video, just this blank, like, it's almost like a playground in like a desert with the only color being the killer in red. It is just like snapshots, or like jump cuts, like killer standing here, then there. Then it's all like a teeter-totter with the doll. It's very eerie the way it's done. So, can I recommend this? Absolutely. Just a good exercise in someone who really understands Giallo. Oh, there's also Red Phones. There's J&B Whiskey. And just a really solid tribute to especially the Argento style of Giallo. And I would say my second favorite of the three. So with that, I'm going to get to spoilers. So after the first woman, the elderly eyewitness, the piano player are killed, the killer goes after the piano player's assistant, who is supposedly his lover, which caused the quarrel between husband and wife that caused the argument in the car that caused the accident that killed the piano player's wife. So the assistant goes into a church. She goes to confess, or go to a confessional. As she's giving it, she hears laughter coming from the confessional booth. As she puts her ear up to it, the killer's long, pointy weapon goes into her ear, which was pretty wild. She falls back. I don't even remember how the killer finishes her off, but it does. And the killer keeps making phone calls and sending notes about the, or not really making calls, but sending recordings to the police about, kind of saying, I'm the killer, here's proof why, because I stabbed her in the ear with this thing, that's why her eardrum was punctured, kind of taunting them. But then we get a scene where it starts coming together when we see Francesca's mother, who we thought was bedridden, gets up, goes outside, starts digging out in the garden, kind of has like a breakdown. Vittorio goes to give her her meds and sees that she's been stashing them under her pillow. But by the time, and also, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Moretti or the other inspector, gets a poisoned apple from the killer, eats it, dies. And I don't remember what the final clue was that made the last living inspector go to Vittorio's house. But when he gets there, he sees that, it was because he's at the library. There's some photos that are found at the piano player's crime scene, including an illustration from a copy of Dante's Inferno. So he goes to the library, finds the copy where the page was torn out of, sees that it was last checked out by Nina, whatever the last name was, Visconti. Checked out by Nina Visconti, so he goes to Vittorio's house, but he sees that Nina has hung herself in the bathroom, and this scene was taken straight out of Deep Red. He's standing in like the foyer, and this wheelchair just comes out of the darkness with this doll on it, saying like, "Mommy, I want to play with you," and just like a little doll voice kind of repeating it. Reminded me just like the laughing doll scene from Deep Red. He picks it up, and then he sees that there's a mannequin. There's a chair that's back to with the red jacket and the hat. He turns it around, and it's a mannequin. But then that's when Vittorio comes out, dressed as the killer, and attacks the inspector. The inspector shoots him, which he shoots, cuts to black, and then like the doll that's talking like Mama, it's getting like as Vittorio goes down as well. I thought that was a nice touch. And then we see what really happened was after 15 years ago when Francesca stabbed her baby brother in the eye, Vittorio strangled her, which we kind of saw glimpses of earlier in the film. He strangled her, then buried her out in the garden, which that was another thing because there was a crime scene with this white substance that was found, and they had it analyzed. So as the inspector's going to Vittorio's house after going to the library, he gets a call saying that it's this sort of plant vitamin that gives nitrogen to plants, which he recognized was in the garden the first time he went to go speak to Vittorio about Dante's Inferno. So it must have been on the shoes of the killer. And then, yes, Francesca, it shows Vittorio burying her in the garden, right where we saw Nina digging during her breakdown. When Nina found out that he killed and buried Francesca, she got pissed took a pointy object and stabbed him in the spine, thus paralyzing him. But then, and so I was thinking, so did she... Well, first, I wasn't too surprised that it was one of the parents, because I think they were even saying that the piano player's wife was also named Francesca. And I was just kind of saying, like, well, how did that work out? And, or that, you know, maybe she survived the car crash and she's just going after people. They really want you to think that Francesca is the killer somehow. Like, even though she was abducted, maybe she was raised as a killer, or she was already deranged, or she escaped, whatever. But I wasn't too surprised that it was one of the parents. Especially, you know, we've seen a number of films, even Giallo, where the character in the wheelchair can walk and is the killer. Which, so yeah, actually she didn't even paralyze him, because we see him walking when he goes to attack the inspector. So I wasn't too surprised that it was at least one of the parents. But what I didn't see coming was, at that moment I was thinking, so... did she kill her baby brother when she punctured him in the eye? Because we haven't seen anything. But just then, there's like this upward shot of the inspector's face, or kind of sideways, and we just see the spike kind of come out, punctured from behind the head, and then as he falls, standing behind him is a young man with one eye. So he lived. And so, was there two killers? Was it just one of them? I mean, it showed Vittorio dressed up like the killer. It could have been both of them. Maybe they were working together. Or maybe the trauma of his mother killing herself and then his dad dying in front of him caused the son to be messed up. With the eye trauma, of course. That was his first victim. It doesn't really say. I don't think it really matters, but so maybe that's just an example of it just trying to top itself with twists. But it's something I was wondering if they were going to address, and actually most of the time even forgot about. I just took it as she killed her baby brother. So it was a nice surprise. But then the movie just ends. But yeah, this movie's got a lot of style. I love the look of it. I love the grainy filters to make it look like it's from the 70s. I love the weird color palette. You know, like how Saw movies kind of have like this almost like putrid green look to it. All three of these films kind of do as well. Not as extreme, but, you know, like with a bit of like the 70s grain to it. It's very visual. There's not a whole lot of dialogue. I mean, there's more than Sono Profondo. I mean, we really only get dialogue when it's the inspectors or when one of them are talking to Vittorio or someone. But there's long, long stretches of just visual storytelling. And a lot of it's very stylish, especially the dream or nightmare sequences. The kills, although not super bloody, are still good and effective. Loved the score. The whole score. I loved all of it. Certain cues I thought were better than others, but it was a very solid score altogether. And yeah, just like the other two films, Sono Profondo included, definitely an example of how the Onetti brothers really not just are fans of Giallo, but they really understand the genre, what makes it work, and how to create their own. And so with that, I have now finished the Onetti brothers Giallo trilogy. And I can recommend all three, actually. I will say this is the least impressive. I mean, it is the most self-indulgent. It does feel more like an experimental student film. But it has its pros to it as well, and I did enjoy it. This one's a bit more streamlined, more of your typical Giallo, and more on the right track. And then this really does feel like it's ripped straight from the 70s. So I could say I'm a fan of the whole trilogy at least, and I'm glad I saw them, and I recommend all three. So there are those, and the only other movie like that I have to review is Homage, which is going to be just as difficult as this one to talk about because it's a crazy movie. But anyway, that is the Onetti Brothers' Francesca, and that's also my 114th Giallo review, and my 161st Italian movie review. So I've done quite a bit.